A man stepped closer. She didn't recognize him. His hand lifted, a gun, pointed straight at her. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She only watched as he pulled the trigger. Bound by Fate, written by Whisper Quill. Previously, in Chapter 12, Isabel kept Damien under the veil of dreams, a mystical state where Damien's soul drifted between dream and reality, unable to fully wake or fade away. The dark spell cast on him was too powerful to be cleansed easily from his body. She gave up everything to search for a way to free him, determined to wash the darkness so his body could heal and he could finally wake. In those days, her curiosity about Damien's bond with Rebecca lingered. She sensed something between them, and Rebecca's concern for him was undeniable. Yet Isabel knew it wasn't her place to assume if Rebecca was his mate. She was human, after all. From the brief encounter Isabel had witnessed, nothing in their behavior revealed the truth. Rebecca unfolded the paper, and it was exactly what she feared and hoped. Her mother's handwriting stared back at her, and for a moment her vision blurred. The words swam as though the page itself resisted being read. A slight tremble in her hands made her cling to it tightly, and she drew in a shaky breath, bracing herself. Dear daughter, today I'm sharing one of the most significant truths of our lives. The words carved into her, each line pressing deeper than the last. Carl was not her real father. No. Her real father was Alexander Locke, a man she knew nothing about. Her identity, even her name, had been a lie all this time. Her actual name was Rhea Locke. The revelation struck like a wound, and a truth hit her at once, reshaping everything she thought she knew. Her heart plummeted as tears welled in her eyes. A strangled cry slipped free as her teeth clenched, her fist twisting the fragile edge of the letter. Rage flared hot, but beneath it, something deeper cracked open. She sat frozen, shoulders caving under the weight of revelation. The paper blurred again as silent tears slid down her cheeks. Each sentence chipped away at her resolve until she buried her face in her arms, the soundless sobs shaking her frame. Her mother must have believed she'd be strong enough to carry this truth. But sitting there, unraveling piece by piece, Rebecca wasn't so sure. For 30 years, the throne remained untouched. Once a symbol of fear and loyalty, it now stood silent, a cold monument to the war that shattered an empire. The last king's fall had not come quietly. The major pacts and the council had joined forces, driven by desperation and fury, to end his ruthless reign. His bloodline had ruled for over a century, but with his death, the old order crumbled. No new king was crowned, and governance passed only into the council's hands. The High Council, known to most as the Circle of Eight, held absolute authority. For 3 decades, they ruled without a crown, each elder guarding a domain vital to the survival of the werewolf packs. Beneath the High Council stood the Council of the Moon, called the superiors among the packs. Next came the diviners, individuals born with spiritual or magical gifts, entrusted with interpreting the moon's will. Below them operated the royal counselors, middle-ranking officials tasked with carrying out the council's orders. Finally, the royal secretary served as the council's unseen hand, managing records, decrees, and communications. For 30 years, this structure preserved order, yet beneath the harmony ran the same undercurrent, that had once drowned a kingdom, ambition cloaked in secrecy, corrupted by power no one dared question. As soon as Damien regained consciousness, his hand shot out, gripping Isabel by the throat. His hold was merciless, forcing her to summon a powerful charm to break free. The spell struck hard, dropping him to his knees. His body convulsed in its aftershocks, and when he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. "What did you do to me?" Damien's wolf clawed closer to the surface, and Isabel knew he had to shift before control slipped away entirely. Conflict tore through him, and only one thought circled relentlessly in his head. Would his beast allow them to leave the city, knowing their mate was still here? He didn't voice the conundrum, but urgency pressed in. He had to decide fast. His beast had to understand. They couldn't go to her like this. It was too dangerous for them both. He exhaled slowly, eyes hardening as the reality settled in. "You are right." Before leaving, Damien turned to Isabel, his expression softening for a fleeting moment. "Thank you for holding things together, and for keeping this quiet." The forest greeted him with the kind of silence that only comes after dusk. Thick, endless, alive. Logan burst through the tree line in a blur of gray and shadow, muscles coiled with weeks of pent-up fury. Spellwork had caged him, forced every instinct down, and now it surged back through his veins like wildfire. He ran, harder, faster, cutting through the mist, paws hammering the earth as if he could outrun the frustration clawing at his chest. Each inhale burned, nostrils flaring, breath quickening in the rhythm of restrained chaos. His wolf wanted her, needed her. The distance gnawed at him, an ache that refused to dull. To Logan, it didn't matter that she was human. That was Damien's burden, Damien's hesitation. The beast saw only his mate, the one thing that could quiet the storm inside. And for the first time, Damien felt the wall between them begin to crack. Rebecca didn't remember when sleep had taken her. Only that one moment she was staring at the ceiling, and the next, she was standing in her old home. Her mother's workspace looked unchanged, books stacked high, papers scattered across the small wooden desk. A photo on the table caught her eye. A 4-year-old Rebecca, arms looped loosely around her mother's shoulders. Their smiles looked real enough to hurt. Then something shifted. The lights flickered, and the photo frame rattled. A shadow slipped past the doorway, and the warmth in the room turned cold. Her mother's voice echoed faintly from behind her, soft, almost pleading. But when Rebecca turned, nothing was there. The air thickened, her pulse quickened, and the scent of burning paper filled her lungs. The room began to spin, slow at first, then violently. Shelves shuddered, books snapping open and shut, as if something unseen was breathing through them. The room felt alive, pulling her in every direction, tugging at her sanity. One towering rack broke loose and lunged toward her. She froze, eyes squeezed shut, bracing for impact. But the blow never came. When she opened her eyes, she was seated in her mother's chair. The chaos had stilled. Papers drifted softly to the floor, settling like ash. On the desk lay a single book, one she remembered from her mother's collection. She reached for it instinctively, but the page inside was blank. Confusion clouded her mind as she flipped through more pages. All of them were empty. She didn't know what it meant. And then she heard it. A distant howl, Her ears pricked at the familiar sound, but her body stayed still. Her pulse spiked once again. The lights flickered once more. And she woke up. Rebecca gasped, her hand flying to her chest as she shot upright. Morning light spilled through the curtains. Her heart pounded, breath shallow, as if she had just surfaced from underwater. For a moment, the echo of that howl still rang in her ears. She pressed a trembling hand to her temple, trying to steady the storm inside her head. The book, the blank pages, the howl, none of it made sense. Yet deep down, she knew it hadn't been just a dream. She pressed a trembling hand to her temple, trying to steady her breathing. That book, the blank pages, the howl, none of it made sense. But deep down, something told her it wasn't just a dream. At 4 a.m., Rebecca's fingers moved restlessly over the trackpad, scrolling through page after page. Articles, forums, medical journals, mythology threads, anything that might explain what she was seeing. Sleep had abandoned her again, another dream pulling her awake the next night. She searched for answers, hoping something, anything, would make sense. She read and read for quite some time, trying to quiet the racing thoughts in her mind. But the restlessness and fear of the unknown clung to her as she sifted through possibilities of what the dreams could mean. Still, every explanation felt either too thin or too strange to believe. Rebecca leaned back, eyes half-lidded, her pulse steadying. Something about these dreams felt deliberate. They might have been pointing her in some direction. Or perhaps it was only her brain's way of coping with trauma. She closed the laptop slowly, the soft click of the lid sounding louder in the otherwise quiet room. The screen dimmed to black, leaving her in a wash of muted lamplight and lingering thoughts. Her head rested against the headboard, the cool wood grounding her for a moment. But even then, her thoughts refused to quiet. The moon hung high above Sunsville, its silver glow spilling over the tree line, and the land below shimmered in its light. Serene forests, silver-kissed lakes, and hills held more than beauty. This land was sacred, not only for its beauty, but for what it represented. Long before packs were named or borders drawn, Sunsville belonged to the first bloodline, the original lineage of werewolf kings and queens. Not the first to exist, but the first to rule. Their dominance was unmatched, their strength both revered and feared. When the last of their kings fell, legend said his blood seeped into the earth, binding it with a power that never truly died. Some called it a blessing from the moon goddess. Others whispered it was a curse, the lingering will of a mad lineage that refused to be forgotten. As centuries passed, new packs rose and new bloodlines claimed power. But Sunsville remained the heartland, the place where the wolves' oldest echoes still stirred beneath the soil. The wolves of Sunsville had long pledged their bond to the Moonstone Ridge, a strip of land believed to be blessed by the moon goddess herself. It was said the moonstone soil carried the first wolf's blood, and under its light, no curse or corruption could take root for long. That was why the Silver Dawn Pack guarded it fiercely, and for 3 decades peace held. But peace was a fragile thing. Later that night, as Alec reviewed patrol routes, a faint voice echoed through the mind link. Alec. Relief hit him sharply, and Alec's response came instantly. "It's good to hear your voice, Alpha. How's Logan?" "Recovering. The spell tampered with our natural sync, and Logan's restless. He's fighting to regain balance. He needs time." Damien replied. Alec exhaled. When are you returning? 2 nights, Damien said after a pause. I'll be back by the next full moon. We can't afford more delays. Alec clenched his jaw. We'll be ready. The city lights of Sunsville looked different this time. Quieter, almost unfamiliar. Taxi pulled into her driveway, the hum of the engine fading as the house stood waiting, still and unchanged. Rebecca had not informed anyone that she was coming back. Not Kris. Not Haley. Not even her manager, Alec. She needed silence, some time to breathe, to sort the chaos still buzzing in her head. Unpacking did not take long, but she moved slowly, her fingers grazing the walls, as if to reassure herself they were still there. A faint trace of her mother's scent hung in the air, soft, floral, catching in her chest like memory itself. When she opened the door to her mother's room, she stood in the doorway for a long moment. Everything was exactly where it had been. The bedspread, the framed photograph on the nightstand, the folded scarf on the chair. A quiet ache pulled at her chest. Grief had a way of looping back around, uninvited. She closed the door softly. After dinner, she went to her study, opening drawers and pulling out files. Birth certificates, education records. She had thought she had kept them all in one place. But one folder was missing. Surely missing now that she knew about her real name, the one that should have contained her original records. Her brows furrowed. Where could it be? She muttered under her breath. No one else had access to this room. Could her mother have hidden it, in case Rebecca accidentally stumbled upon it? A flicker of unease rippled through her. She had never thought to closely compare her certificates before. The altered one had looked original enough, but now the absence of the true one felt deliberate. She exhaled, rubbing her temples. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "I will look again tomorrow." It was her day off, after all. And maybe, when she found those records, she would finally be one step closer to the truth her mother had buried. For now, she needed quiet. She hadn't yet found the strength to face the concerned faces waiting out there. Kris, Haley, all of them. She would see them soon. Just not yet. Rebecca leaned back in her chair on the terrace, the faint hum of the city filling the silence. She didn't know if she would ever feel like herself again. Too much had changed, and somewhere deep down, she feared it was only the beginning. She picked up the phone she had tossed aside earlier, her coffee still warm in her hand, as she scanned the missed calls. She reread the messages from a few days ago. She hadn't answered them yet, but she might reply tonight. Haley had been worried sick after hearing from Alec that Rebecca's phone was either stolen or missing. She clearly didn't know what had actually transpired in Riverton, Rebecca thought. Messages had come every day, checking in. Most recently, Haley had written to say she was out of town visiting her family, but promised they would catch up once both were back in the city. Kris, on the other hand, hadn't sounded as fazed by her silence as Rebecca had expected. He had dropped a few messages asking about her well-being and how things were going in the new city. His last message, however, had seemed slightly suspicious. He wanted to meet her as soon as she returned, claiming he had something important to discuss. Reading Kris's message made her curious, and she sent him a quick hello. She texted back to let him know she had just arrived, adding that she needed a day or two to settle before they could meet. Then she opened Haley's message to inform her that she was back. Rebecca wasn't sure if she could keep Kris informed about the events in Riverton. Jordan had said the word couldn't get out, and since Damien was his friend, Kris might not even know about the attack. She was at odds with her thoughts once again, but she knew it wasn't her place to reveal the details of the attack on Damien. That was his truth to share, if he chose to. The office after the weekend was relatively too quiet with Alec and Haley missing from the office. She had known about Damien not being present, but Alec's absence felt a bit odd. She couldn't help but wonder if she would have spared any of this a thought before if certain things hadn't happened in the past couple of days. She felt like even the slightest change around her now was making her suspicious. She felt the energy around her shifting. She herself was waiting for the other shoe to drop, maybe. The pessimistic inside her overpowering her senses, keeping her on edge, even on the slightest change in order of things. A few hours later, she felt her energy shifting. With her mood slightly less on edge, she felt like she could breathe again. Maybe the events of Riverton Bay will wear off soon, now that she was back in Sunsville. Later that evening, once she was home, her thoughts drifted back to her mother's words. The urge to see every secret unravel pressed harder than ever, until her phone rang, cutting through the moment. She had expected this call. She had been ignoring him all day. Lifting the phone, she went straight to the point. "I told you I would get back to you soon," Rebecca said. "And I told you we need to sit down as soon as you come back." Kris replied, then added with a teasing lilt, "Hello to you, too. Glad to hear your voice, Ms. Becca." She wouldn't admit it out loud, but hearing his voice eased something in her, and a quiet sigh slipped past her lips. "I'll come see you myself. I'm tired right now." Kris let out a breath, his shoulders loosening. "I was just glad to know you were alive." His tone held an absolute seriousness, and a question rose in her throat. But before she could ask, he added, "I'm kidding. I know you value your boundaries, and I respect that." Rebecca was grateful for Kris's comforting presence, a faint smile curving her lips. "Just give me a few days. I need to sort some things before I can go back to normal." She braced herself for more questions, expected them, but Kris surprised her. No pushing, no digging, just quiet understanding. He was just relieved that, after everything, she appeared unharmed, even if he wasn't sure how much of that was true beneath the surface. His mind raced, the dawning reality pressing in on him. How was he supposed to approach her? The time had come. She had to know who they were, what they were, and how she would fit into it all. Would she ever accept it? He wondered. It wouldn't be easy, but for now, he told himself he needn't worry. Not until she was ready to listen to him. They spoke for a few more minutes, Kris briefly updating Rebecca on everyone else. And then the call ended on a warm note, with an agreement to meet soon. It had been days since she last visited her mother, so she drove to the cemetery to spend some time with her. Half the time she sat in silence, staring at the engraved stone, her thoughts loud, but her lips still. How could she ask her anything now, when in life her mother had kept so much from her? She didn't hate her for the hiding. Perhaps her mother had only wanted a chance to explain everything. Above all, Rebecca wondered how hard it must have been to carry so many secrets alone, buried so deep. She didn't know what to expect the next time one of her mother's letters appeared. Time slipped by. She whispered soft nothings into the quiet, hoping they might ease her mother's soul, and in return, soothe the ache of her absence. Later that evening, on her way back, the car broke down just a few streets from home. Irritation clawed at her throat, her cheeks still damp from crying at her mother's grave. Taking a deep breath, she steadied herself before her mood could sink further. It wasn't far. 2, maybe 3 streets away. She chose to leave the car by the roadside, locked the doors, called for a tow, and set off on foot. A sudden wind embraced her as she stepped out, brushing cool against her sleeves. She rubbed her palms along her arms, finding a strange calm in the slow rhythm of her walk. Passers-by glanced at her, some raising their brows, but she ignored them and kept moving straight ahead. A vile thought surfaced. Perhaps people had a habit of looking at orphans in a different way. Rebecca kept her pace. Near her residence, there was a park, and she turned left, thinking the path would take her there. But a few minutes into the walk, she realized she had gone the wrong way. She should have turned right. She shook her head, pushing back the heavy feelings clouding her judgment, and kept her pace steady. As she neared the main road, she glanced both ways before crossing. She wasn't sure if it was wise to walk absent-mindedly or foolish. A few droplets touched her cheeks, pulling her gaze upward. Uh-oh, it's going to rain. She lifted her arms to shield herself, her phone snug in her pocket. A loud honk startled her, forcing her to turn mid-step. Within seconds, the rain came down in sheets, her focus shifting. Home was only 2 streets away now. Her eyes caught a car in the middle of the road, swerving as it nearly struck a man crossing blindly. She dismissed it and broke into a jog, hoping to outrun the downpour before she was drenched. She paused under a nearby shade, huffing at the timing of even the weather turning against her, then continued walking beneath the awnings. Seconds passed. She was soaked through, but she didn't care. As she turned onto her street, a shadow flickered at her left. She snapped her gaze that way. A man was closing in, his pace faltering when he realized she had noticed him. A shiver ran down her spine at the stumble in his steps. She swallowed hard, turned sharply, and took a step forward, catching him again in her peripheral vision, moving almost in tandem. Rebecca's heart pounded wildly in her chest, and she drew a deep breath before forcing her pace forward. She knew she was being followed, or perhaps it was only paranoia. Plenty of people lived in this area. Just because one man stumbled under her gaze didn't mean anything. He could have been any neighbor. Still, her gut tightened with unease. She quickened her steps and turned again, catching him in clearer light. A cap shadowed his face, but she saw him slow once more. That was all the motivation she needed. She broke into a run, leaving the safety of the sidewalk for the middle of the street. Rain soaked her clothes, her breath ragged. With one hand, she fumbled for her keys, the other swiping raindrops from her temple and eyes. A minute at most had passed, yet dread stretched it into eternity. She spared one glance before reaching the gate. The man was gone, nowhere in sight. Relief surged as she pushed through, unlocked the front door, and stumbled inside. She palmed her neck roughly, dragging in deep breaths. Maybe it was only paranoia, or she had just sprinted like a lunatic across the street from an invisible threat. She made it to the kitchen, her palms pressed against the counter. "What is wrong with me?" she muttered deliriously. "Am I going to be paranoid about every passerby from now on?" Running her hands through her wet hair, she poured herself a glass of water and sat down. She took a few sips, pausing for deep breaths to steady the erratic pounding of her heart. Resting her temple against the cool counter, she felt herself begin to settle. But just as the calm started to take hold, a sudden pounding at the door jolted her upright. Her ears drummed when another thump rattled the entrance door. Eyes fixed on it, she slipped her hand across the counter to grab her phone. Before she could wake the screen, a voice rose through the pounding. "It's me," it said. "Open up." Her brows twitched as another sound echoed from the other side. She knew that voice. The realization startled her, and she scolded herself inwardly. How? When? Had she begun to recognize it? Before she could untangle the thought, another insistent series of knocks reverberated through the house. "I know you are in there, Miss Hastings." There was only one person on this planet who called her that. Her steps were quiet but steady as she moved toward the door, her heart hammering in her ribcage, threatening to break free. She steadied herself with a gulp of air, releasing it slowly, then raised her hand to unlock the door and peered through the narrow opening. The sight that met her eyes was one she was not prepared for. Damien Scar stood on the other side, a man of near perfection, now disheveled, his face and hair damp, water droplets clinging to his suit, and his eyes. His eyes burned with a wild intensity as they locked straight onto hers. The shock from before had not worn off as Damien took in her appearance. "Are you all right?" he asked. Her lips parted, but no response came. She thought she must be dreaming, that tonight was nothing more than an illusion, a conjuring of her troubled mind. She saw his lips move, but heard nothing. "Rebecca?" Damien tilted his head to one side, then raised his hand to push the door open wider. She stepped back instinctively. As the door swung, a rush of cold wind swept in, carrying the sharp patter of rain across the threshold. The chill struck her first, slicing through the haze in her mind, and she shivered, her breath catching in her throat as a faint gasp escaped. His lips moved again as he stepped inside. "May I?" In that instant, the fog of her thoughts lifted. She was no longer drifting. She was fully present, standing at the entrance. Broken words stuttered out of her mouth. "What are you—" His arm brushed lightly against her as he stepped inside her sanctuary. The touch jolted her back to reality so sharply, she knew she wasn't dreaming. "Please, do come in," she uttered. Her posture straightened, irritation settling across her face, though a fleeting flicker of relief betrayed the confusion stirred by his unexpected arrival. She closed the door behind him, locking it out of reflex. He stood between the lounge and the open kitchen, taking in her place for the first time. He drew in a deep breath, her scent flooding his senses, claiming the right side of his mind. It was faintly floral, softened by the rain, yet unmistakably hers. For a moment, the storm outside seemed to vanish, replaced by the quiet pull of remembrance and desire. Something in him tightened, a sharp ache of longing. Her presence carried both familiarity and distance. He steadied himself, jaw flexing as though restraint alone could anchor him. The scent was not just hers. It was the reminder of everything he had risked, everything he had kept buried. Damien's gaze lingered, sharp, yet conflicted, torn between stepping closer and holding back. Rebecca stared at his back, questions swimming in her eyes as she searched for any sign of discomfort in his gait or posture. His injuries might still be fresh, she thought. The moment the thought crossed her mind, She shook it away and stepped forward. "How are you here?" He turned, his focus settling on her, though he refused to meet her eyes. "I couldn't reach you, and that had me worried." He gestured toward the phone resting on the table, and her gaze followed. She must have looked like a deer caught in the headlights as she peered back at him. Picking up her phone, she saw the missed calls and unread messages from Damien, each one checking on her well-being and where she was. She quietly set the phone back down, though not before turning off silent mode. "I apologize for intruding at this hour. I wouldn't have come if it wasn't—" His words faltered, a half apology for something he didn't regret. He couldn't explain why he had come unannounced, so he settled for the simplest word: important. "Why did you come here? I mean, how—" Her hands gestured toward him, her expression betraying the turmoil within. "You were—" He knew what she meant, so he cut in gently. "I am all right now. Don't worry." Bold of him to assume I was worried. Rebecca's intrusive thought rang loudly in her mind, but she quickly slammed it down. Standing only a few feet apart from him felt surreal. Just days ago, she had seen him bleeding in an abandoned alley. Something must have flickered across her face. Her silence was enough to spur Damien into action, and he stepped closer. He had come with a clear intent to steer the conversation away from himself and focus on his concern for her tonight. "As I was—" Rebecca cut him off. "You knew where I live." Her question didn't faze him. "I know where everyone lives." His odd response came a little too fast, and she narrowed her eyes, scrutinizing his expression. He only cocked his head, his face betraying nothing, except that, compared to when he first stood outside the door, it had softened in those few seconds. She also noticed his fists, once clenched, now hanging loose at his sides. "Don't you know how to be a good host, Miss Hastings?" His words baffled her. Sliding his hands into his pockets, he added, almost lazily, "Shouldn't you be asking me to sit?" "I don't recall you being invited, Mr. Damien." Her cold reply sent a thrill down his spine. He gave her a single nod, impressed by her wit. "Touché." "You look—" he began, taking note of her appearance, but before he could finish, she interrupted. "I know." She cut him off, her eyes dropping to the floor as a flush crept across her cheeks. One hand tugged at her sleeve, the other brushing her damp hair back in a nervous gesture. "I wasn't prepared for the downpour on my way home." His eyes lingered on her briefly, a question swimming in them, and she felt suddenly self-conscious. "You should change first. You could get sick." His soft words washed over her, and she looked up at him. "Please, make yourself comfortable." Rebecca gestured to the lounge on his right, before slipping quietly into her room. A minute later, she returned, her eyes scanning the lounge, only to find it empty. She turned at the faint sound and spotted Damien in the open kitchen instead. He was removing his wet jacket, placing it neatly over the back of a chair. His tie, already undone, now hung loosely in one hand. Damien's presence in her home had wrong-footed her. She caught herself questioning how easily this man dared to enter her space and settle into it, as if he belonged there. Clearing her throat, she stepped toward him and handed him the towel. His fingers brushed lightly against hers. Rebecca's hand twitched, but Damien's sudden grasp held firm. Her fingers were cold, yet soft beneath his palm, and his own were curious about the delicate shape of her bones and what it might feel like to truly hold her hand, but he did not partake. When their fingers touched, for a fleeting moment, Damien thought miserably that this was as close as they could get, brushing fingertips beneath a small towel. It remained only a fleeting grasp, and he gave her hand a gentle squeeze before letting go with a quiet, "Thank you." The delicacy of his touch felt electric. Her breath stole away, her body stilled, and her heart pounded loudly enough to drown the room's silence. Damien's brain took this image and immediately created several new neural pathways that had never existed previously, connecting the idea of Rebecca with the concept of home. It was an extremely uncomfortable development, though not unwelcome. Rebecca blinked, breaking free of her reverie. Heat bloomed across her cheeks, and the sudden, unrelenting need to put distance between them took over. She turned away, retreating at once. Women didn't run from Damien, as a rule. Quite the contrary, in fact. For him, it was an unfamiliar and unpleasant sensation, one he was slowly learning to endure from his own mate. When she returned after changing a few minutes later, her gaze lingered everywhere except on him as she walked toward the open kitchen. Damien took the opportunity to look up at his mate with wistful eyes. A thought surfaced, and he found himself smirking at how unnerved she seemed by his presence. Damien's moment of quiet triumph was cut short by a low, echoing growl, unmistakably from his stomach. Rebecca froze mid-step, her gaze darting to his midriff. She looked torn between her instinctive irritation at his unannounced visit and the simple courtesy of good manners. At last, she relented. "You must be famished. Do you like lasagna? I have some leftovers." Damien was indeed starving after a stressful return to his city and catching up with everything else. The events of the past few days had drained him, and he gave her a sheepish nod. "All right, appreciate the offer." He fell quiet for a moment as he studied her. Silence fell between them. Her hands remained steady as she flicked through the motions of heating a plate of food. "Could you make me a coffee too?" he asked shamelessly, stepping in to help. The casual request unnerved her, though not as much as the eyes that watched her so intently. Damien's gaze did something she couldn't explain, sending a faint tingle down her spine. The scent of cedarwood and musk unsettled her further, unsteadying her in the moment. "I won't need your help, so please." Handing him a loaded plate, she gestured for him to sit. He spared her one more lingering glance before obeying. On the outside, Damien wore a facade of confidence wrapped in a relaxed posture, a composed expression, and a dashing appearance. He did look every bit the man who knew how to carry himself, but inside, dread knotted tight in his chest. He was calculating every move, every word, trying to appear approachable, hoping to make her feel at ease after barging into her home. And as much as he would love to hide it, the peace he felt upon seeing her swallowed him whole. Yet he held back. He had to. He had no other choice for now, at least. He was listing his options, overthinking his words, his eyes distant, lost somewhere beyond the kitchen table, when her soft voice broke through. "It's getting cold." His expression darkened briefly as he looked at her. Then he dropped his gaze to his plate, and at last began to eat. Rebecca's attention flickered from him to the task at hand, and it was impossible to overlook his presence. Damien pressed against her personal space, just as he had before. And just like then, she didn't stop him, didn't say anything. Why? Why him? She wondered. Before the thought could spiral, his voice echoed between them. Does it bother you? Twisting her neck slightly, she gave him a sideways glance. What? Damien set the fork on his plate, chewing the last remains of his bite before answering. Me? Being here? In your home? Rebecca walked up to the counter, placed a hot mug of coffee in front of him, and seated herself on the opposite side. I don't usually let people cross my boundaries. She felt too drained to dance around her response. Then how come you let me? Damien spoke slowly. His gaze lingered on her, the rest left unspoken. The tension hung between them, heavy enough that she had to look away. The meaning implied behind the unfinished question wasn't lost on her, and she refused to entertain it. Not because she didn't want to counter, but because she didn't know how. Their dynamic had shifted drastically from where it began. Noticing the stiffness in her posture, he eased back in his chair. He hadn't intended to make her uncomfortable. He only meant to tease her. Only he knew she was his mate, and he was still trying to make peace with the reality of what stood between them. If anything, he was grateful that she no longer felt repulsed by him. Even though she was human, surely she must feel something. Even a fraction of what he felt would be enough to last a lifetime. He decided to lean into the familiar rhythm between them, the one where he nudged and drew a reaction out of her. He tipped his head, lips curving. He drawled, I am honored if I'm the first. Rebecca froze mid-reach for her mug, the only sign she'd heard him. Don't get used to it, she muttered, though the faintest twitch at the corner of her mouth betrayed her. Damien caught it. His smile widened just a fraction, not smug, just quietly pleased, the kind of expression he lately couldn't suppress around her. Oh, too late, he said lightly, nudging his plate a little closer to her side of the counter. I get 1 lasagna and 1 coffee. He paused when she scoffed, noting the small shake of her head at his audacity. I would like to think I am special, he added, fingers brushing his collar as he straightened it, his gaze flicking toward her with a spark of teasing warmth. Her eyes flicked to him, and he felt a spark of warmth in her stare before she averted them. You're not special, she said, but her voice lacked its usual bite, softened by something she probably didn't want to examine too closely. It's just hospitality. Besides, you took care of me when I was your guest. She smacked her lips shut, realizing she needed to stop before she dug her own grave. Leaning over, he braced his elbows on the counter. Ah, yes. How foolish of me. I mistook your hospitality for affection. Rebecca snorted before she could stop herself. The sound startled her, and she blinked, unsettled by her own reaction. And Damien didn't miss it. His shoulders eased, the earlier tension melting from his face. For the first time since meeting her, he felt like the floor beneath him wasn't about to collapse. See, he murmured, tapping his fingers lightly against the plate, the rhythm steadying him. This isn't so terrible. Rebecca breathed out, long and slow, trying to steady herself. The faint curl of steam from the coffee drifted between them, softening the air. No, she said quietly. It isn't. For once, neither of them felt the need to run from the moment. Time passed as they sipped their coffee in quiet. Neither tried to fill the silence. Both remained lost in their own conundrums. Damien waited for the right moment to speak, to explain the reason for his unannounced visit. Meanwhile, Rebecca was surprised at how accustomed she was beginning to feel to his presence. There was no awkwardness. Instead, a strange sense of familiarity settled over her, calming in a way she couldn't quite explain. She kept questioning her intentions. Why? Honestly, she felt a tad disappointed, realizing she had forgone her usual reaction. Was it because of the recent time they had spent together? Because she felt thankful to him? Or because, in some strange way, she felt indebted to him? When had she begun seeking comfort in his company, of all people? The thought alone made her chest tighten. A ridiculous thought struck her. Perhaps people who endure traumatic incidents together bond over shared trauma, because nothing else she could think of explained her situation with this man sitting right in front of her. A dull throb pressed at her temple, her eyelids growing heavy, as a quiet sigh slipped from her lips. She peeked over the rim of her mug at Damien, his eyes already fixed on her. There was warmth in them, she noticed, though his face was tired, the faint shadows beneath his eyes betraying the sleepless nights of pain. She spoke softly, her question edged with hesitancy and caution. "Have you healed properly?" She wanted to ask more. How? The pain must have been unbearable. How had the healing gone? How had he not succumbed to the damage? But she kept those thoughts unspoken. "I have." A tired smile touched his face, and she muttered, "Good. I'm glad to see you okay." Unable to hold his gaze for long, she gathered both cups and carried them to the sink. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. She cleared her throat, trying to steady herself, her weight shifting from one leg to the other, a nervous habit of hers. Her voice was tentative as she broke the silence. "Was there something you wanted to discuss?" she asked, trying to sound casual despite the weight of his stare. Rebecca stood with her back to Damien, her shoulders tense. Before she could ask again, he decided to ease her mind. "I do have something to say." His words stirred a new sense of dread that loomed over her, and she braced herself before nodding for him to continue. "What is it?" "I need you to prepare for some things before you fully come face to face with my truth, Ms. Hastings." His words slipped into a whisper as he stepped closer, never breaking eye contact. Swallowing the tension, Rebecca kept her head straight, her eyes locked on him. Meanwhile, her internal battle began again. His truth. What did he mean? Why must he always speak in riddles? Her thoughts tangled as she parted her lips, to voice the questions swirling inside her. But no words came out. Loosening his crossed arms, he rose to his full height, almost intimidating her, though the softness in his expression gave him away as he spoke. "From now on, you will remain under my protection." Protection? From what? This time, her mind caught up instantly, and he, too, had an explanation ready on his tongue. Still, he took his time before speaking, his tone threaded with concern. "They saw you, Rebecca. The people who tried to kill me. And they'll come after you, too." His calm voice contradicted the weight of his words. "I am appointing Jordan at your door, 24/7, starting tomorrow, and you will have a few days to adjust to the fact that..." Damien's hesitation stalled his speech. He pondered his next words before continuing, "I need you to accept that I'll be staying close as well." Her heart thrummed as she spoke with deliberate restraint. "I don't need your protection, just because I am a woman." His eyes softened at that, his lips curving in an involuntary response around his mate. "I know." He wanted to say more, reveal more, but, as always, he held himself back. "You are my responsibility, Ms. Hastings," he stated firmly. "Who made you responsible for me?" Her tone was soft, edged with a flicker of frustration. Damien's voice rose a notch. "I have been the one responsible." His words echoed between them, and he struggled to clarify what he meant. "I mean, ever since you walked into my—" The words tripped over his tongue, halting clumsily. "My rescue." He drew a deep breath, steadying himself, and spoke again, more controlled this time. "I need you to understand me, Ms. Hastings." "I don't think I can," she admitted helplessly. "No harm will come to me here." "You don't know that, do you?" His tone carried a challenge, and she sniffed in irritation. "You can't expect me to follow your orders." She held back from using harsher words, her voice steady as she continued. "I understand if you're concerned because of what happened in Riverton. And yes, you did save my life. But that was a city I knew nothing about." Damien spoke calmly. "You have to put aside your ego for a minute." His voice was soft, yet the intensity in his eyes wavered Rebecca's confidence as she stared back. "You were on a business trip with me. You were there for an official purpose, and that made me responsible for you." Huffing, she broke eye contact and muttered, "How is it any different from when you came to my rescue that night?" His clipped response echoed between them. "It is." Rebecca looked up, fire in her eyes, as Damien informed her, "What you just did went far beyond a simple favor, Ms. Hastings. You have no idea what you have stepped into, and now your life is on the line, because of me." His tone remained controlled, steady. "Those people are capable of real evil." His words hit her like a bucket of ice-cold water. She wasn't naive. She understood exactly what he was implying. She only needed clarity, confirmation of his intentions, and hoped he might finally explain. "You will remain under my protection," he said with finality. "I'm afraid you don't have another choice." His eyes flicked to her hands as they began to fidget, and he added, "I wish things could have been different." He drew a long, steady breath before murmuring, softer, "For your sake, at least." Rebecca decided to put forward her concerns. "I appreciate your concern. I truly do," she said earnestly. "But I refuse to be under 24/7 surveillance. It isn't necessary." For a moment, she hoped he might be reasoned with. "Do you really think I wouldn't have wanted to give you a choice? Especially when it involves your safety?" His voice softened under the weight of the truth, and his crestfallen face carried a sadness she couldn't ignore. It landed with more impact than he likely intended, and to her own surprise, she found herself wanting to understand the reason behind it. Something in her resolve began to waver. She couldn't bring herself to refuse him, not when he stood before her with such unguarded concern. Damien's fingers twitched with the urge to reach for her, to reassure her, but he curled them into a fist instead. "Have some faith in me," he murmured, then added more quietly, I refuse to put your life at risk. I won't." Her mind and heart tugged in opposite directions, and a sensation of helplessness fell over her. Her resolve broke, and she sighed in defeat. "Fine. I will try to cooperate." "Thank you." The tension in his shoulders eased, and a rush of relief washed over him at her words. It wasn't everything he wanted, but it was a start. Damien circled back to the counter, deciding it was best to put some distance between them, and seated himself in the chair. "I've been meaning to ask, have you noticed anything out of the ordinary lately?" Out of the ordinary? Her brows knit in confusion. "Have you? I mean, since you came back?" There was no insistence in his tone, only concern. Nothing comes to mind, really." She paused, mulling it over, until a thought surfaced. "Actually," she began slowly, "I could be paranoid, but I felt like I was being followed." Damien straightened instantly, alert. "When?" Remnants of panic lingered as she thought back to his question. "Tonight. I mean, I'm not sure, but there was someone closely behind me. Or," she faltered, chasing the memory again, "I hadn't noticed before, so I can't be 100% certain." Damien huffed in rage, a dead seriousness settling over his face that made her look up sharply. "You should have led with that, Rebecca." Without another word, he rushed to the door and disappeared outside. The slam echoed through the hallway, leaving Rebecca staring after him, stunned by his reaction. Barely a minute passed before he returned, striding back inside. The downpour had stopped. His clothes were dry now. "I don't think you were being paranoid," he said quietly. Outside, he had caught the faint trace of a foreign scent, lingering only for a few seconds before vanishing entirely. The moment etched itself permanently into his mind. He stepped closer, his expression tightening with focus. What did he look like? "All I saw was a gray hoodie and a baseball cap," she answered honestly. "As soon as I neared my gate, he was gone. And then, a few minutes later, you showed up." Rebecca took longer than usual to open the door. Damien now knew why. He could hear her heartbeat, quick and uneven. The thought pressed in on him. She shouldn't be alone. "All right," he said firmly. "I don't think you should be alone at all. I will stay here with you." Rebecca's mind raced, but the words jammed in her throat as a single thought clawed its way forward. "No, this is a mistake." She shook her head, refusing the arrangement. "He was only here to locate your house, Miss Hastings, and you cannot change my mind about that." "This house is well protected. Nothing will happen to me in here," Rebecca insisted, but Damien only lifted his head, letting his gaze sweep over her home with quiet calculation. No mere human could easily get in. Maybe, but... He cut himself short. Without protective wards, this place would never hold back a supernatural being. He swallowed the truth, leaving Rebecca unsettled by his unfinished words as he continued. "We've shared a space before, Ms. Hastings. There's no reason for us to feel awkward in each other's company." His calmness only stoked her fury. Her blood boiled, and she seethed with rage. Grinding her teeth to keep from uttering anything vile, she exhaled sharply. Her eyes shot daggers at him, and he must have seen it, because his posture shifted, a subtle attempt to soften the storm he had stirred. I meant, I am comfortable in your company, and from what I saw in Riverton, I would like to assume you are too." His voice lingered on the question, leaving space for her to counter if she wished. He wanted her honesty, always. He wanted her to speak her mind to him, to feel whatever she needed to feel without restraint. "It's a request, Rebecca." She thought, what's the worst that could happen if he stayed the night? They had shared a space before, and he was clearly concerned about her safety. Damien's words echoed between them. "You have seen firsthand what they are capable of, and believe me, they are far worse." Rebecca's gaze locked on him, her thoughts racing even as his voice worked its way under her defenses, nudging her toward surrender. "Why does it have to be you?" she demanded. Damien instantly understood what she meant. "You know why," he answered softly. His tone carried no arrogance, only truth. "I am their ultimate target. They saw you with me. The only reason they would come after you is to hurt me. If I stand between you and them, I can stop the harm before it touches you." Irritated, Rebecca muttered something that might have been, to the listener with impossibly acute ears, impossible to catch. But Damien heard her fine. "They should have done their homework better. I'm not that important to—" Her tongue froze. She realized too late that she had spoken aloud. When she looked up, he was already striding closer, finishing her words with quiet certainty. "You are." The unexpected admission hit her, and her heart stumbled, leaving her momentarily breathless. Swallowing hard, she forced composure into her voice. "There's a spare room upstairs. I will set it up for you." She turned quickly, leaving him behind, his words ringing in her ears. Her steps faltered on the staircase, each movement uncoordinated as if the floor itself tilted beneath her. She pressed down hard with each footfall, willing herself to stay steady. Several thoughts rooted themselves in her mind, immovable and raw. He shouldn't say such things. Whenever she believed she had no mental capacity left to spare, this man appeared and proved her wrong. Breathless, she rushed up the stairs, his words chasing her. He shouldn't say such things. Why does he anyway? Lying in bed around midnight, Rebecca thought the unusual turn of events were finally settling, finally giving her a moment of peace. But she couldn't have been more wrong. The night didn't pass uneventful. Another dream came for her. This time it was even more vivid than ever. She found herself standing in a dark room. Only a single candle burned on a table, its flame trembling, casting shadows that stretched and coiled along the walls. The sound of a doorknob twisting echoed sharply. She froze. She braced herself for something. She didn't know what. But nothing happened, not even after what felt like minutes. Rebecca's gaze drifted to the flickering candle. A strange heaviness pulled her toward it. She moved, slow steps that felt disconnected from her own will, until she reached the table. The smell of burnt wax wrapped around her. Her eyes fell to the page beneath the candle, its edges blackened. She lifted her hand to pick it up, but the moment her fingers touched it, the page vanished completely. Her eyes blinked open, and she was standing in a narrow street. Cold wind sliced at her bare arms, biting through her skin. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering, and breath forming pale clouds in the frigid air. She thought for a second she had woken up, but the quiet told her she hadn't. It was too silent, too empty, Not a single soul in sight. She began to walk. A light shimmered at the last door on the right. Hope tugged her forward, but before she reached it, a massive wall erupted out of nowhere, cracking the ground beneath her feet and blocking her path entirely. Heart racing, she turned, slow, shaky, and froze. Someone was closing in on her. Their stance wasn't aggressive, but the air itself shifted with a warning she couldn't ignore. Tight knots began to form in her stomach. Her breaths came in puffs, each one trembling. The cold became unbearable. He stepped closer. A man, a baseball cap pulling shadows over his face. A gray hoodie she recognized. She didn't know from where, but she knew it. His hand lifted. It wasn't empty. A gun, pointed at her. All she could do was stare as he pulled the trigger. A sharp gasp ripped out of her. Her body shook violently. Heat spread across her abdomen. She looked down. Her clothes were staining dark with blood. The wound punched dizziness into her skull. She felt herself falling, but she didn't fall. She stayed rooted to the spot, as if the ground itself refused to release her. Pain seared through her, hot, unbearable, and she felt herself slipping. She blinked again, gasping for air, and found herself on the ground. Another place entirely, another nightmare. Massive trees towered above her, branches like skeletal arms blocking out the sky. She could barely move her head, but everywhere she looked, there was forest. And then there was fire. A circle of fire formed around her. Flames devoured the dry leaves and branches, smoke rising in suffocating clouds. The heat pressed against her skin. She tried lifting herself onto her elbows, but agony shot through her torso. She hissed. Sweat coated her forehead, thick and cold. The fire crept closer, her skin prickle in fear. She wanted to wake up. She knew she was dreaming, kept chanting in her head, "It's not real. It's not real. It's not real." But her hands were slick with blood and dirt. Her wound pulsed, sending waves of pain through her whole body. She tried to move. She couldn't. She cried for help until her voice cracked. No one answered. The flames crawled toward her, encircling her completely. Her arms, her legs, her whole body trapped inside a tightening ring of heat. Her shrieks echoed through the trees as the pain surged. Burns licked at her skin. The ache deepened, heavy and consuming. Maybe her time had come. Maybe these were her final moments. She swallowed hard, eyes burning, her throat hoarse from screaming. Her body instinctively tried to pull away from the flames, but there was nowhere left to go. Her last thought was simple, terrifying. I'm going to burn to death. Barely a few seconds passed before Damien rushed inside, body tense and ready to strike, his stance slicing through the darkness as he searched for a threat, only to realize there was none. Just Rebecca, thrashing in the sheets, her screams filling the room. She nearly fell off the bed, and Damien lunged forward to catch her. With one hand he flicked on the bedside lamp. The soft light spilled onto her face, soaked in sweat, eyes squeezed shut, breathing frantic. Tear tracks stained her cheeks. He steadied her body with both hands. Rebecca, wake up. Her limbs jolted again, and he tightened his grip. Wake up, Rebecca. But her screaming only grew louder. Panic flickered across his features. He grabbed her shoulders firmly, shaking her. Rebecca, wake up. He cradled her face between his hands, voice raising but softening at the edges. Wake up. Come on. Wake up. He sounded desperate. And suddenly, she stopped. Her whole body went still. A shuddering gasp tore through her, eyes snapping open wide as she bolted upright. Her breathing was erratic, a new stream of tears slipping down her cheeks quietly. She hadn't fully realized she had woken up to reality yet. Her eyes remained unfocused, glassy, as if she was still trapped somewhere between the nightmare and the room around her. Damien picked up on it immediately. Gently, he brushed a few damp strands of hair away from her face. His own heartbeat hammered painfully in his chest. Each second felt heavier. Seeing her like this, shaking, lost, terrified, it shattered something deep inside him. His wolf howled in his mind, pained at the sight of his mate like this. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close with a soft but unyielding steadiness. Her temple rested against his sternum. He held her tightly, as if holding her together, hoping the warmth alone would help ease her back to her senses. "Hey, it's just a nightmare," he murmured, voice low and rough with emotion. "You're awake now. You're here." His hand cupped the back of her head, thumb sweeping slow circles meant to ground her. "You're safe. You're here with me." He swallowed, breath unsteady. "I've got you. I've got you." Still, Rebecca cried quietly against him, her body loose with exhaustion, yet trembling with remnants of fear. She wasn't fighting him. She wasn't pushing him away. She simply collapsed into the warmth, unable to do anything else. Minutes passed before her consciousness began to return in fragments. Her hearing cleared first, then the weight of her own breath, then the solid feel of Damien's arms anchoring her. Her fingers twitched weakly before she raised her trembling hand and curled it into a fist in his shirt. A small, helpless gesture. Fear still pulsed in her veins, but something else threaded through it now. Something steadier. His presence, his warmth pressed against her, the steady rise and fall of his chest grounding her as he spoke softly. "Breathe with me." And with each breath she took, the nightmare retreated a little more, dissolving into the edges of her mind. The terror dulled, replaced by an unfamiliar calm that spread through her every time Damien's hand moved soothingly along her spine. She hated how shaken she felt. She hated how real the dream had been. But most of all, she hated how much comfort she sought in this man, as if she needed him just to feel like she hadn't drowned yet. For the first time since waking, she let out a fragile, shaky breath, her fist still tangled in his shirt, as if afraid she might disappear back into that nightmare if she let go.